button too.
Sorry.
You guys can hear us okay? All right. Good evening, and thank you for coming, and welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting for October 8th, 2019. Leanne, will you be our Secretary Pro Tem since our Secretary's not here?
Sure.
All right, so could you please take the roll?
Andy Duran.
Present.
Ann Hill.
Present.
Mark Berry.
Present.
Leanne Charlotte, present. Julie Gottschall, absent. Richard Haag.
Present.
John Rosen.
Present.
So we have a quorum and we can begin. So would you all join me and stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have a bit of a celebration tonight, so we're gonna rearrange the agenda just a little bit, and I'm gonna move our action items to the top, and I'm gonna start with action item B, which is our approval of a Lake Bluff Elementary School principal who Dr. Sophie is going to make a statement about now, right?
I am going to provide to you the announcement I provided to the staff today at both of our buildings. And then there will be a formal press release that's actually going out now. So I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. It was just over 2 years ago that both Margaret St. Clair, who is our principal at the elementary school, and I decided that life is short and both of us really wanted to retire and have a little bit more relaxing and peaceful lifestyle than what our jobs afforded us. Our administrative team spent some time discussing the transition of these positions as well and began talking about different options. I am happy to announce that tonight I am recommending to you as our Board of Education that Kelly Bay be named the new principal at Lake Bluff Elementary School beginning July 1st of 2020. Kelly knows instruction, she knows our staff at both buildings, she loves the elementary school where she has taught and worked, she knows our families. Over the past 2 years, I have discussed this with all of you as a board. Excited that we have a great internal candidate that knows all of our stakeholders and loves our community. We are so excited to have her begin next year, keeping in mind that she also has knowledge of the middle school and where our kids are going. Most administrative teams have new members every year, and it is very unusual that our administrative team has worked together for over 5 years. It's also important to note that we could have potentially up to 5 new administrators on our Lake Bluff team next year. We know that Margaret and I are both retiring, but we also have a few of our other administrators that have advanced degrees and certifications that may also move towards their passions. Therefore, we chose stability and continuity with all of these changes over an open process because of the anticipated changes that are coming to our administration. We will be filling Kelly's position at some time after the first of the year. The position will definitely be a .50 middle school assistant principal, but the other 50% will need to be determined after a new superintendent is named and who will then provide feedback to form his or her new administrative team. Any other potential administrator openings will be filled as needed, most likely through a process and with the input of the newly named superintendent. It's also important to note that Kelly is still going to be handling her curriculum and middle school assistant principal jobs this year. Margaret's still going to be working until June 30th as well as myself. Kelly will begin transitioning in the spring when we begin making decisions about the 2021 school year. We needed to have a principal who loves kids, is child-centered, caring of staff and families, a good communicator, someone who is calm and provides steady leadership, and will be here for a while and bring consistency. Kelly surpasses this in all of these areas and has many gifts. So join me in welcoming Kelly as our new LBES principal. You want to come up here and say a few words? And you might want to introduce your guest here too.
Thank you so much. My husband Jay Bay is here tonight to celebrate
So I'm proud of that and happy that he can join me. And I did write a little bit down because I'm excited and feeling nervous, but above all, I want to thank the Board of Education for allowing me this opportunity to lead LBES in 2020. While I'm still deciding if this makes it any easier to cope with Margaret and Dr. Sophie leaving, I am proud and humbled to be able to follow in their footsteps as I work with teachers, students, and parents of the Lake Bluff Elementary School in this new capacity. I plan to work hard to support teachers and students, and I'm very much looking forward to being at LBES again. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We do need to formalize this. Let's just make sure. Does anybody on the board have any questions or comments that they would like to address? So, not hearing any, may I have a motion to approve the, I'm reading the wrong one. May I have a motion to approve the LBES principal contract for Kelly Bay effective July 1st, 2020, as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
John Rosen.
Yes.
Leanne Charlo, yes. Julie Gottschall, absent, sorry. Richard Haig.
Yes.
Andy Duran.
Yes.
Ann Hill.
Yes.
Mark Berry.
Yes. You're in.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Awesome. You don't have to stick around. You can if you want. but
She's got some homework for tomorrow, so.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being our new principal at the elementary school, effective next academic year, just to make sure it's clear in the community. Okay.
Thank
so
you.
Now to make sure we don't forget things, the second item on our action, in our action items is item A, we're going out of order, the personnel report. And this month, the personnel report includes Anne Marie Anderson, a teaching assistant at the elementary school for, this is a non-licensed resignation, effective October 4th. Another, a non-licensed change of assignment is Nancy Goldberg, an administrative assistant to the Director of Student Services, Technology and Assessment in the district office, replacing Joanne Durig, effective 10/9 at $23.80 an hour. And a non-licensed new hire, Maria Murillo Gonzalez, a teaching assistant at the elementary school, replacing Anne Marie Anderson, effective 10/9, salary of $15 an hour. Does anybody on the board have a question, comment, or concern about any of that? May I have a motion to approve the October 8th, 2019 personnel report as presented by the administration?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Rosen.
Yes.
Charlo, yes. Haig.
Yes.
Duran.
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
Berry.
Yes, the motion's approved. Okay, action item's done. So now we go back to the top and do a couple little housekeeping things. We always provide the opportunity for the public to make public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, please do so and come to the podium. Not seeing anybody. I would also offer the opportunity for the board to add, anybody on the board to add a future agenda item or an item that we need to briefly discuss tonight. I have a couple things just want to make sure that are clear. Jean and I made the decision earlier today to add an additional discussion on our next board meeting on October 29th
Correct.
for standard-based reporting. So that will be on the agenda. Anybody interested in that can come and address the board on that day. We'll also be adding an agenda item on that same meeting having to do with a resolution before the Illinois Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly at the next Triple I conference, having to do with guns in schools.
Arming teachers.
Arming teachers. And we've been asked to address this issue by some local residents as well as the League of Women Voters and take a position and vote one way or the other at the Delegate Assembly. So that'll be on the meeting as well.
I would like to add to that, and certainly tell me if you'd like to do this another way. The school board conference is after our November meeting. What I would like to do is have you discuss it at the next meeting, October 29th, and then we would have the resolution ready for you to vote on and approve at the November board meeting, which would be prior to going to the delegate assembly. Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Okay, so, sorry, this is all out of order, so I'm throwing myself off here. And so I think we lead right into our discussion, and we have our search firm from School Exec Connect, and Dr. Harry Rossi and Dr. Gary Zabilka are going to present some really amazing stuff to us tonight, and I'm going to let you guys summarize all that for us. This is all having to do with our search for our new superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
So before we go into the slides, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update, as I did at the last meeting, just in terms of the numbers of individuals who have applied for the position, just a little bit more. So first of all, in terms of the online survey, I'm not going to go into detail on that because that's going to be part of our presentation. But we were at 134 individuals the last time we met, which was, about a week and a half or so ago. We're now at 154 who have responded to the online survey. At that time, we had no individuals who had turned in paper surveys, and at this point, we have one person who turned in a paper survey at the Park District.
Good.
So candidates, last time around when we met, we had a total of 28 individuals who had applied. We are now at 37, and we still have 2 more days before the deadline. The deadline is October 10th. So we're at 37 right now. Last time around, we indicated to you that there were 9 sitting superintendents. There are now 12 sitting superintendents. There were 4 associate or assistant superintendents. There are now 5. There were 3 principals. There are now 4. There were 3 former superintendents. Now there are 4. There were 4 directors, now there are 7, 1 assistant principal, which is the same, 1 chief academic officer, which is the same, 1 deputy superintendent, the same, 1 person from a private position, the same, 1 student, the same, 1 person who has the title of executive director, so that's the total of 37. At the time we reported it, there were 4 individuals out of state. There are now 7 out-of-state individuals who have applied and 30 in-state people who have applied for the position. So just to give you a little bit of a flavor of how many people have applied and what their positions are. So the board asked us to conduct focus groups with the following groups. There were altogether 10 groups with whom we met, not including the board. The board was the 11th group with whom we met. With really great input from all of the groups that we met with. Some of them were, smaller than others, but still we really felt whether it was a small group or a larger group that people were really serious about providing us with great input in terms of what they were looking for in the next superintendent. Conduct an online survey to gather input from school staff, parents. We have done that. Create a new superintendent profile based on the information, and that's what we're going to talk to you about in a minute. How will the profile report be used? Board, interview committees, consultants will use the new superintendent's profile to screen and conduct interviews with candidates. We will have the profile in front of us. We recommend that you have the profile in front of you when you're interviewing, and we will say the same thing to the stakeholders committee. Board of Education may use this profile report to find out more about the thinking of the district's constituents. So when we go through this, you'll really, I think, have a flavor, at least in terms of the groups with whom we met, as well as the individuals online who responded in terms of their feelings about the district. Consultants will use the new superintendent's profile, as I mentioned, to screen candidates and develop interview questions. Candidates and the community may use the profile to find out about the strengths and challenges of the district. So we present the report to you as a board, and then the board decides what they are going to do with that report. Most boards provide at least some, if not all, of the report on their website so that it's public knowledge as to what has happened. That also allows the candidates, when they're looking at these positions, to understand a little bit more about the district. So, summary of the data collection: 10 focus groups, 11 including the board, 62 participants not including board members. The online survey, there were 154 responses, as I mentioned, and then a little bit of disclaimer about sampling methods, and survey and the report percentages are rounded to the nearest whole number. So, what were the questions? What are the district's greatest strengths and attributes? Why would a new superintendent want to come to the school district at this point in time? What are the district's greatest challenges or barriers to success? What should a new superintendent know before he or she accepts the responsibility? What should the priorities be for the new superintendent? And we always made it clear we were talking about the very top priorities in that person's first year as superintendent. What are the most important characteristics and skills the new superintendent needs to possess to be successful in the district at this point in time? So, after meeting, and this is just the feedback from the focus groups, we are going to go over the online results as well, but this is just from the individual focus groups gathered, combined together. So, district strengths: supportive and engaged parents who like to be involved in their children's education, excellent and talented staff consisting of committed, dedicated, and passionate people. Very, very strong feeling about that one among all of the groups with whom we met. So there's a really, positive feeling about the district and the staff members that you've hired, licensed and not licensed. Small, tight-knit, educated community, likes to be involved and included and works together well. Enthusiastic students who benefit from a student-centered environment. Again, I'll just say that we heard over and over and over again from everyone how much they love the students here in this school district. Quality facilities that are clean and well-maintained. Fiscally sound district with a variety of resources.
Harry, if you don't mind
Yep.
going back to the previous slide.
Sure.
I want to point out a distinction in the strengths. The first bullet, if you see that, where it talks about supportive and engaged parents. And then the third one talks about a small, tight-knit community that likes to work well together. I want to mention that that first bullet point is specifically about the parents of the children that attend school here, that it's a that it's a supportive and engaged group of parents that like to be involved. The third bullet point talks about your community at large, the village, the park district, all of your departments that you have here in the village, that people feel in general that that's a strength. Again, hopefully none of this sounds surprising to you. You should recognize this and feel that same enthusiasm that we heard when these were being shared with us. We see these all as great attributes as to why someone would want to work here. So, thanks.
Thanks, Gary. So, challenges. And these are not mutually exclusive categories, obviously. So, as well as, being a positive part, there was a feeling that the supportive and engaged parents who like to be involved in their children's education can also be a challenge if the right people are not in the right positions. But I think even when individuals spoke about the fact that it can be challenging dealing with parents in this community, it was never in a really negative way. it was always, yeah, we really do have these very supportive parents. They're so involved with their children as they should be. Usually that was something that was added, but it can be challenging sometimes because of the amount of time it takes to make sure that people feel as if their thoughts are adequately heard. Changing demographics, requiring additional supports and more resources. I think both in terms of changing demographics ethnically as well as racially to a certain extent, and also challenges related and supports and resources for students who may be coming in with specific special needs. Communication between the buildings as well as what's conveyed to parents appears to be inconsistent or inaccurate at times. I think the feeling was that they don't always hear the same message if they have children in more than one school. The message may not always be consistent between the schools. Because of taxes, always trying to figure out how to do more with less. I can tell you, we hear that every district we work with. It's a common theme as a challenge. Board should endeavor to reflect and represent the changing demographics in the district. And again, I think that's something that, at least from what we heard, seems to be something relatively recent in terms of at least some of the changes in demographics.
Harry, can I ask a clarifying question on
Sure.
that very last one?
Sure.
Is that saying that the board should be more diverse?
I think the reflect part of it is perhaps that it might be good to have a little more diversity on the board, and the represent part doesn't deal with the actual composition of the board. New superintendent priorities for that person in his or her first year. Listen to everyone and learn about the district, its history, its strengths, challenges before taking action. Very strong feeling that people who come to this district should really understand how unique this district is and know the history of it as well as some of the changes. And I think what it really says is, stop, look, and listen and understand about this particular district before you start mandating changes. Develop sincere quality relationships with all constituents and demonstrate that all are valued. So again, make sure that it's an inclusive environment and that all people, regardless of where they live within the district, are heard and valued. Create a clear, consistent communication plan that provides clarity for all stakeholders. I guess what I would point to in this one is, again, doesn't necessarily relate to how large or how small the district is. People in general, over all of the searches that we do, are really looking for better communication, not necessarily more communication, but maybe clear and consistent communication. We hear that over and over again, almost everywhere we go. Visibility, be visible in both schools while assessing both the climate of the buildings and the needs that should be of each. So really want that person to make sure that he or she is not an office superintendent, that he or she gets out to the building. They see Jean as someone who is always out and about, who knows everyone and is in the buildings, and they want to make sure that that you're not hiring someone who's going to be sitting in the office. Be aware of the changing demographics. Again, that seems to be a prevailing theme, at least among the people that we spoke to in the focus groups. Begin to develop a plan to address changing needs required to make all students successful. So here we are, what it is that people are looking for in terms of new superintendent characteristics and attributes. People love weighing in on all of this. A genuine, authentic, and by the way, these are the slides that we usually classify as someone who walks on water. A genuine, authentic, warm, and caring person who is approachable and trustworthy. An active leader who prioritizes visibility in the schools as well as in the community. And I want to make the point that they also want to make sure that it's understood that this person becomes a very strong part of the fabric of Lake Bluff and not just part of the school district. So visibility internally and externally. Student-centered leader who makes decisions based on what's best for children. Collaborative leader who builds strong relationships and develops a sense of community through consensus. An experienced educator with a deep understanding of teaching at all levels and especially with a variety of student learners. Decisive individual who gathers input but knows when to act. So really, again, someone who is collaborative but knows when it's time to actually make a decision after all of the input. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary to go over some demographics with you.
So what Harry just addressed were the focus group results and the trends that we had noticed when we met with people live. These are the results that we got from the online survey. And as Harry had mentioned earlier, we had a total of 154 total responses. Of those, 62% were parents. 34% were teachers. And then you can see the breakdown of the rest of the different groups who weighed in. We'll say that although that the teacher group may seem low, almost half of those who are represented in the focus groups were teachers because of the number of teachers that showed up for the focus groups, both from the elementary and middle school. Also, if you look to add those up, if you're a mathematician, you may say, well, those don't add up to 100%. People were asked to identify with any of those groups that they, categories that they fit in. So, for example, if a parent is also a teacher or vice versa, they could actually mark each of those. So again, the same questions were basically asked. This, however, provided a menu of different options for those who participated in the online survey to designate what they felt were the district's strengths. They got to choose their top 5. As you could see, the top response was the quality of the teaching staff, followed by the community support of education. Both of those, more than half of your population saw those as the greatest strengths. That also we felt was consistent with what we heard in the focus groups. Then the remainder dropped pretty quickly. If you'll notice, student achievement, although it's rated high, and you'd like that one to be rated high, that people consider that to be a district strength. The school learning environment, use of technology, those all had at least a third of the population that respond favorably of those all being strengths. From there, it does drop off to then student-centered communication with parents and community, quality of district administrators, and student commitment to learning. Those percentages, however, are dropping off quite a bit. The only reason we include them is because in the scheme of things of the entire survey of over 20, those were the ones that were identified, even though, like the last one, for example, only 1 in 5 may have commented that student commitment to learning is a strength. Wasn't a strong indicator. Okay, so those are the district strengths as identified on the online survey. Interestingly enough, the greatest challenges, barriers, a theme that we continued to hear regarding the demographics. We feel that this one pretty much addresses that one, is consistent with that. The diversity, equity, and inclusion is 55% felt that that is a challenge to your district at this time. Notice the big drop off from that one being identified. And again, the fact that you heard it often from the focus group comments, and you see it here. I mean, so that's a very consistent theme. The next one identified here as a challenge or barrier is the feel, and this isn't not uncommon. In other words, in the searches that we do, it's not uncommon for the response to be that we feel like we're emphasizing too much test scores versus student learning. Okay, it's just one of those things that occurs commonly in these surveys. Communication with
Yeah,
parents.
just-
Yeah, please.
Just for my personal clarification,
Please.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
So the second one is saying that they would prefer mastery than 2 test scores.
Yes, yes. And this is confusing because it's also listed on the strengths choices, and it didn't come up at all in the strengths. And if it came up as a strength, that would be, the strength is that there's an emphasis on the mastery, the learning, rather than test scores. The fact that it came up in the challenge category shows that they feel that there may be more of an emphasis in the test scores than the mastery. At least the perception is of such. Moving further down the line, and again, they tail off very quickly. You know, from our perspective, as those who do these surveys pretty common, usually you have, for districts that have challenges or barriers, you have 3 to 5 that are listed in the 40% or higher range. You had one that was listed 55%, and then everything tailed off very, very quickly. If I'm sitting here as a board member, I'm thinking, you know, it's good to know what has been identified, but to know that it hasn't been strongly identified as challenges. So if you're looking through a magnifying glass trying to find out what are any issues, from our standpoint, we're not even sure that these would be issues. They would just be things to be aware of, okay? So then, just as with the focus groups, you know, this online survey also then asked about characteristics and the skills needed for a new superintendent. Number one, by and large, was somebody who builds good teams and brings out the best in others. Somebody who's collaborative and includes others in decision-making was very high. You know, here you've got several that are 40% or above. Someone who's visible in the schools, again, came out very consistent. It's one of the things that we look at, is what we heard in the focus groups consistent with what we are hearing through the online survey. And we saw a lot of consistency, the visibility piece being another piece of that. Someone who's very knowledgeable in curriculum and instruction and student learning, someone who's student-centered. This district is so student-centered, and that came through both in the focus groups as well as the online survey, that you definitely want someone who's student-centered. The warm people skills, someone who's approachable, has an inspiring vision, and excellent communication skills. I'll also mention, I was going to mention it when Harry was going over this aspect of the focus groups. We did hear, and also we're cautious when we say this, but also feel that it probably needs to be said. There are several people who said, we'd like a clone of Dr. Sophie. So, I mean, that was something that, just so that you know, the truth in packaging, that did come out a number of times. We didn't include that in this because we typically wouldn't. We're looking at traits and attributes, but the fact that it was said is something that, as a board, you'd be interested in knowing.
She had 2 days.
Did she apply? You said 2 days.
She had 2 days.
That would have been in the former superintendent group.
So then the priorities, there was an open-ended where people could go ahead and write in. And again, what we do there then is we look for trends of word usage and so on, of things that are brought up, and then we combine them to identify, you know, a handful of priorities. And again, these shouldn't surprise you. They're consistent with what we heard in the focus groups. Again, somebody who's highly visible throughout the district and community, develops strong relationships with everybody, somebody who's a strong collaborator, somebody who recognizes the changing demographics, provides necessary professional development for staff to better meet the needs of all the students, keeping lines of communication open and transparent with all, that being staff, parents, community. This is something that I was thinking about this when Dr. Sophie was talking about the potential transition of administrators that you have here. They're looking for someone who will unify the staff and community during a time of transition of leadership with the assurances of a seamless transition. that was something that came out in the written comments of people who wanted to identify priorities. And then finally, reviewing and evaluating programs in place to be sure that the district is providing the quality program the community deserves. So those were the online responses to the survey. And what we typically do then is we take a look at the focus group responses and then the online responses, and we look for those most common trends that we heard from both of those venues, so to speak. And we develop what we consider to be then the superintendent's profile. These then will be the characteristics that we feel as a board you'll be looking for in your next superintendent. So your next superintendent, some of this is going to sound a bit redundant only because we're repeating things that we have heard both through the focus groups and the online survey. But basically, in using this to help identify the candidates, you'll be looking for a person who's highly visible throughout the district, develops those strong relationships that will serve as a foundation of quality collaboration, somebody who's knowledgeable about working with a changing demographic, and able to recommend quality professional development opportunities for staff. You'll be looking for somebody who's a very collaborative team leader who builds strong relationships and develops a sense of community through consensus. I mean, you're hearing the same things over again, a lot of this having to do with relationships, but you appear to be an exceptionally relational district, but we will continue. Someone who's genuine, an authentic, warm, and caring person who's approachable and can develop the trust throughout the district. Someone who's an experienced student-centered educator. It doesn't say experienced superintendent, just an experienced student-centered educator with a deep understanding of teaching at all levels of school district leadership. Focuses first on what's best for students. Again, someone who's decisive, who gathers input and knows when to act in the best interest of all. Then finally, someone who's demonstrated success in previous leadership roles, okay? Clear communicator who is able to share a consistent message with board, parents, community members, and staff. Someone who can maintain a quality image. Again, this is not something that we say in all districts. You truly, as a district, have a quality image. You want to maintain that, and yet able to create a new vision for the future of District 65. And then finally, a leader who can unify the staff and community during the transition of leadership, the assurances of a seamless transition. All told, those 10 characteristics are those that we felt were evident the strongest throughout the work that we did in meeting with focus groups as well as through the online survey. And in doing so, felt that this is what we would recommend to you as the board. We'd like to solicit your thoughts, ideas, and any input that you might like to share with us regarding what you see here as far as whether or not you feel these characteristics fit the bill of what you believe you'd like to see in your next superintendent.
So I have one question.
Sure.
Some of this is really broad and a little bit macro, and I'm wondering if there was any conversation, I know it wasn't on the survey, but in the focus groups on level of experience and people's perception about a sitting superintendent versus a new superintendent versus, that sort of, did any of that come up?
No PhD.
Right, PhD, no PhD, yeah, all that, like, level of education, level of skill, level of experience. Anything on that?
It's interesting because we break it down and we ask, what are you looking for in terms of skills and years of experience, superintendent, non-superintendent. I would have to say, unlike some other places, some other districts where we've done these surveys and done these profiles, people here seem to be looking for the next great leader, regardless of whether it's someone, we clearly did not hear that people were looking for someone who is a sitting superintendent. They're really looking for someone, and it is really.
He's going to tell you to use the microphone.
I'm sorry. I was using my principal voice, usually that works.
Sure.
Most of it really was on the macro level, even though we try to zero in on maybe some more discrete skills and so on. Doesn't seem like that's what people are really looking for here. They're looking for a great leader, and, you know, there were clearly no feeling that it had to be a sitting superintendent. We have been in, there are some very large, less personal districts, I guess I would say, where we do hear, you can't bring anyone in here who isn't a very experienced superintendent because they're not going to be able to handle everything in the district. We heard none of that here. It really was mostly at the macro level.
And just to add to that, I would also say that, again, repeating the one piece that Harry said, a quality leader, a quality educator, okay? And quality educator being someone who has exceptional experiences as an educator that can demonstrate those. And then finally, a quality person. And I think more than anything, it's that third one, the strong people-person relational skills that came across as a need for this district. That was pretty consistent amongst all groups, parents, community members, staff members.
I think it's interesting trying to interpret this because when I look at the way Dr. Sophie has done this job, you know, she is very relational. She's great at that communication piece. But I suspect if she weren't managing a lot of the, you know, the finances and the particulars of the HR and the hiring and like all of the multitude of those things that happen behind the scenes, if that weren't happening, I think that would have been high on people's list. So it's, you know, we don't see it here, but I'm sure that it's not, I'm sure we don't want to overlook that.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm having a hard time synthesizing this into some answers. And I don't know if it's maybe because our community is unique or if maybe there were some additional things that should have been in the survey. But as I look at this, obviously everybody wants a great leader and a great educator. I mean, that's great that came out, but we all knew that going in. And I think I'm having a hard time, and maybe it just I need more time to think about it, but I'm having a hard time really drilling down into this and seeing, I have a good sense of what people are looking for. I don't know that I have that sense from this. And
This is also your opportunity to add,
Right.
if you think that something is missing.
Sure.
Like I was gonna point out, if Leanne sort of already suggested it, is, and we talked about this in our private session when we did our focus group, this new person has to be a willing wearer of many hats.
Right.
This is a small district, not a lot of administrators, and this person has to come in here knowing full well that they gotta do a lot of different things and be completely comfortable with that. So I don't see that, and I think that needs to be expressed explicitly.
Mark, what I would say to that is, and again, we're just reflecting what we heard, which was really very little, as I
No,
mentioned.
so I thought like Gary said, now is our chance to also add what we think.
It is, it is. What I wanted to say is, besides this, we're going to provide you with a variety of questions where you can drill down in terms of asking the kinds of questions that you're looking for, in addition to giving us feedback tonight.
I was going to say, consistent with what you just indicated, that the most difficult thing is anyone you interview is going to clearly respond that they are clear, consistent communicators, or they'll be visible. So the challenge is to convert what is on this piece of paper during the interview process and getting an understanding that the person you're interviewing actually has those qualities. And that's not easy to do. You're not going to be able to sit across the table and say, oh yeah, that person's going to be a better communicator than this person. You won't know that until, to be honest with you, until they probably get into the school system. So that, to me, that's the challenge. I mean, everything you put on a piece of paper here, we probably could have put on the piece of paper before we even started with the surveys. So the challenge for me is taking this, processing it during the interview, and then determining whether those people that we interview have the characteristics we're looking for.
One part of it is also our reference checking.
Reference checking is crucial.
Of whether or not they're actually doing what they say they're doing, and we don't just rely on.
But no one's going to say I'm not very genuine. I'm not really not that warm either.
No.
I'm glad I did an interview with you.
Well, how do you successfully check references? You know, if they're trying to get rid of their superintendent, they're probably saying he's wonderful. He or she is wonderful. Get he or she off our hands. Who do you go to? How do you find legitimate references?
Well, that's part of our challenge, and that's why you hire us to do that. We are both extremely active in the field and the profession. We know of those candidates that put on a good show versus those who are authentic, those that are genuine, which are a couple of the adjectives that were listed up there for those kinds of people that you're looking for. Also, one of the things that we haven't even gotten to this point yet, but oftentimes people question, should we do a site visit? And that's where we'll really find out how somebody is performing. This day and age, our firm rarely recommends, in fact, we typically try to discourage people from doing site visits. What we have found more often than not is that even the most challenging superintendent in a district, people will put on the greatest show for the very reason that, I think, Richard, it was you that maybe pointed out that they're trying to get rid of their superintendent, and they'll make it look like it's a phenomenal experience in that district,
That's what they did for Gene.
just so that
No, I
that
had
person
a
will leave.
couple parents, remember the couple parents?
So, but to the point of the authenticity and the checking of references, our roles are such that not only do we look at or consider the references that they've listed, because they will provide letters of recommendation, which you'll see for those candidates that we recommend to you, but we go beyond those and go to those people that know other people who have been in that district and ask them, so what is this person really like? And is this person, you know, truly the person that we believe, you know, we've seen or heard to authenticate who they are and what they're presenting to us, so that you don't have to do that, although you can. We also can provide references for you to follow up on if you'd like to, beyond the references that we will utilize before we even bring them to your attention. So we will fully screen and vet candidates to the point where when we come back to you on November 5th with what we call a slate of candidates, we feel that any of those 6 or 7 candidates that we will present to you can potentially be your next superintendent. It'll be a matter of whom you feel most comfortable with and who best fits your district.
Can I
And it'll be
can I
completely
interject-
vetted to that point.
Interject one thought.
Please.
You're coming to us with a slate of candidates, and that, just for anybody who's listening and watching on TV, that's in closed session,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
That's closed session, those names are not made public.
No.
We're protecting people who are, it's a private search, so just so we
In
all.
Illinois, that's what we have private searches, so.
And that's on everyone's behalf, only because it enables us to recruit candidates, some of the better candidates out there that may not be looking for jobs without their current districts even being aware of it. So that's why that's done in closed session. And that's why we're fortunate to have that confidential search.
One thing I'd like to add, and that is, regardless of what discussion you have about what should be added to the profile, just so we don't forget it, if, you know, through the discussion, if you would then put it in writing and send it to Mark, and then on to us to add to the formal profile.
The other
Also-
piece, oh, I'm sorry. Go
No, you go ahead.
Okay, if you insist. This is to your previous point, though. Typically, the survey and the focus group questions don't ask much about technical skills because, interestingly enough, and this is not, a bad light on anybody, parents oftentimes don't realize what skills are necessary. Teachers don't realize what skills are necessary. The technical skills of the job, again, is part of the reason why we feel you hire us. Between the two of us, we've got over 30 years of experience of the superintendent. We asked the questions about school finance. Not much came up in your survey about finance. That's also unusual. It did say about spending tax dollars wisely. There was that one point that, mentioned that. But we ask candidates about their expertise in school finance to make sure that we're bringing you somebody qualified.
Issues such as personnel and curriculum are also the technical skills that people oftentimes don't recognize. Curriculum did come up in your online survey, where people felt it should be somebody who has a strong knowledge and background in curriculum and instruction. So that piece did come across, and that would be considered to be a technical skill. But to your point, Mr. Duran, yes, most of it is more the human and social skills that people would like to see in your next superintendent. We address the technical skills in combination with this to bring you quality packaged superintendent candidates.
So that's pretty standard then, that's not just unique to
It
here.
is,
that's- okay.
but I would say this, there are many other places that we've been and done searches where many of those technical skills are mentioned much more prominently than they are here.
Why is that?
And
I think this
it's usually
illustrates my
because of a
point.
deficiency.
Yeah, because it's a deficit.
Because the
Yeah.
stuff is happening. If
Yeah.
it weren't, then it would have risen to the top of the list. And I appreciate that you'll be interviewing people about those technical skills in your work, but I'd like to make sure that when we're asking questions of people, we're covering some of that too.
Absolutely.
And in a way where, we can have people giving us some examples of how they've, real life handled some situations regarding, any of these areas, curriculum, finance.
We're going to provide you with questions that you may use, adapt, or not use in 7 different areas of education, including finance, curriculum, boardsmanship, and everything.
And we're also I'm gonna also reach out to everybody to provide questions, to offer the opportunity to the board to provide additional questions that they would like addressed, and then we can make a decision as a board as to narrowing it all down and what are the most important questions and who's gonna ask what questions. But, so I think Harry and Gary will provide a list to get us started in brainstorming, but we also have the opportunity to add our own questions if there are certain things we want to get at.
Okay.
I would like to point out, Gary, you said, I forget the exact word you said, but you talked about how the survey and/or focus groups captured the relational nature of this community. I think I would point out that was a big capture. That's a huge thing. And I think anybody coming in here, and that covers a lot of these different bullet points, and it isn't a technical skill, but it is a big deal. And so I think that's a big hit. That's a big find that is well articulated, and that needs to be expressed clearly to anybody coming in here.
Appreciate hearing that, Mark. I mean, if you think back in previous situations, and we've seen it in other districts, where you could have the most expert superintendent in technical skills, but if they're missing that relational piece in a setting that requires that relational aspect, that person will not be successful because they'll be viewed as someone who knows it all,
Yeah.
but they can't convey it in a way that people like to hear it and collaborate and work through that.
Yep.
And we've seen that happen numerous times, where it basically does boil down to, and this is what you'll decide best, who is the best fit for your district. And our job is to provide you with the best quality candidates that we can to select from to find the one that fits best. It's like giving you 6 or 7 different pairs of shoes, and which one is going to fit the best.
I guess I've
That's
always
my
been a
language.
disciple of Ron Heifetz at Harvard, and fortunately, my district allowed me to do some work with him. And, one of his main theses is that technical skills you can hire people to handle, you can delegate. Technical skills, adaptive leadership skills, you can't delegate and you can't hire someone. You need to find someone who is truly an adaptive leader, or make sure that it's someone who can be developed into an adaptive leader. The technical part is not as important. I think that's reflected also in this.
So just one other question. Do we typically make the results of the survey publicly available so people?
This will go on our website.
okay.
I mean, with the board's permission, we would put this up tomorrow.
I think
Yeah,
that's a good
I just
idea.
wanna make sure.
Because as you're applying for school districts, you look at the school district website, And it should be very visible while people are researching everything about us to meet with both of you right now. So,
Great, thank you. Yeah.
And also, again, having done this numerous times as we have, with the profile, including the strengths, the challenges, and so on that were identified, most districts would be proud to have that kind of profile. In other words, your strengths were quality strengths, your challenges were, not to minimize them, but they weren't significant challenges. They're challenges, but they're not things that are going to be of immediate concern to your district, or that your district is heading the wrong direction by any means.
Well, I think what we need to figure out is that we have things in both lists around the same percentages. So that's another thing that, you know, without doing a deeper dive, it's hard to understand what that means, but noted, yeah.
Well, and that was interesting too, because in the focus groups, you know, we met with 10 different focus groups. And I would say it was almost half of them, when we asked what the greatest strength was, and they talked about the parents and the families who are engaged in their child's education as the strength. But then when we asked the next question about the challenges, and we put it in there in the same verbiage, because that's how we heard it from people when we were doing the focus groups. They said that's also the biggest challenge of this community. And, you know, it's one of those things, you know, Andy, to your point, yes, it's on both lists. Is there anything that one can do about it? I'm not so sure, but I think it's something that is beneficial for not only you as the board to know, but as an incoming superintendent to know, is that you've got, you know, great parents that are very supportive of education, and sometimes can be challenging parents, and they could be the same person in 2 different days.
Sure.
Just good information to know, may not need to address.
Sure. Thank you, yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments, concerns? So I'd like to ask a kind of a logistical question about, since we were talking about how do we get to, the interview questions we choose to get to some of the technical things we want to make sure we're capturing. And how, in your guys' experience, how do we work through the process of developing the roster of interview questions? Do we need to have a meeting dedicated to that, a closed session, what's the best way to work through that?
I don't know if you need a whole meeting for it. You know, it depends how your board operates. But you definitely should, typically the way it would work is we'll provide you, when we present the candidates to you, we'll also provide questions for you at that point. And sometimes during that meeting, we'll talk to you about how that can happen. Typically, the way it happens is that since there are 7 categories, that you know, you make sure that there is at least one question, whether it's one of ours or not, in each of those separate categories. And board members can, you know, someone who really has a particular interest in finance may want to ask that question. It gets filtered to the board president, who then, you know, assigns which board member is going to ask which questions. And usually the board members will say, I'd like to ask a question in this category and in this category. Given the amount of time that you're going to have with them, at least during the first round, you're probably not going to be able to get to more than 2 questions each. But if you ask each board member to give you 3 questions that they would like to ask from the categories, making sure that there is at least 1 question from each of those categories. We can go into more detail when.
Yeah.
So when you present the slate, we'll talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
And
that's
then,
part of the slate meeting.
and then just kind of another slightly logistical question, and Shelley might be able to answer this too, is the time, how much time do we have from that meeting to when we start interviewing? I don't recall the calendar.
2 weeks. Well, actually, is it 2? About 2 weeks. Because we meet with you, or you meet like the first week in November, and it's almost 2 weeks on a weekend later.
So the first
Not
meeting in
quite
November
2
is when we
weeks.
meet with you guys, early November.
November 5th
Okay.
is our slate meeting.
You know, from a personnel standpoint and from a candidate that interviewed for superintendent positions, the one thing I always caution you on is when you're setting up questions, don't have a question and then 6 parts. It's really hard as a candidate. I mean, it might be a test. You could see if they write down, but I don't think you get quality answers when you do that. You're best off asking just a basic question, and maybe a quick follow-up if that's needed. But I've seen that happen, and it's frustrating in an interview when you get that, because you're too busy trying to remember what the question is rather than focusing on the answer.
Part of our presentation, it's also part of our materials that we'll provide you with at that meeting on the 5th, goes through kind of the do's and don'ts, if you will, of interviewing, and one of them is the multi-part question.
Awful.
But it also then gives you some information that will help facilitate the process so that you're all on the same page with, with that information. And, at the same time, we'll say it now, we'll say it again on the 5th, is that the candidates are also interviewing you at that time as well as their future employer. And are you the group that they're going to want to work with? And therefore, you too want to present yourself well, and that's why we're glad to work with you as well, to whatever extent. There are places that tell us, we've got this one, we don't need any support. There's others that are very open to hearing and reading the information that we have available from them.
Thank you. Any other questions on that topic?
Can I make one other quick, just a reassurance for everybody? Richard, I'm going to go back to your question. Consultants like Harry and Gary know candidates' personalities and they get to know communities. And the only reason I'm here is because a consultant that had this the last time called me and said, he knew me when I was a PTA president. And he said, Lake Bluff is you. You belong in Lake Bluff. We're going to be posting it in a month. I want you to interview. We think you'd be a perfect fit for there, because he knew me and he knew Lake Bluff. And so if it's any reassurance to you, I know both of these gentlemen. They are in many of the circles that I'm in, and they know a lot of candidates through teaching, through classes, through our professional organization. They know a little bit about the district from me. And so, I can reassure you, they know people and fit. And the people they bring to you will fit in the district. It's just obviously the strengths and how they can move forward. So I just wanted to mention that. I wouldn't be here if a consultant didn't know me and say, hey, this is for you. I probably wouldn't have applied here, because I wouldn't have thought about it. So,
Thanks for sharing that, Gene.
So the last thing I want to raise,
If I can follow up on that, how many people have you suggested that they should interview here?
quite a few, because they approached me at the superintendent conference.
At least a half dozen,
Yeah.
maybe more at this point.
okay, so I get a question. I emailed you guys about this earlier today, and I decided to bring it to the whole board. When we do we have to prepare in advance. There's a logistical thing. When we do final interviews in December, we're gonna do a dinner interview with finalist candidates. So we need to book a place or make an arrangement. And I also would like you guys to chime in on your experience, what you're seeing other districts do. And Jean, you had some good thoughts on this too. One option is to go to a restaurant. We have to have a private room. I think that's a given, whether it's off campus or on campus. And that limits us probably outside of Lake Bluff. I don't know if there's a private room in Lake Bluff that we'd want to use. Are we willing to travel, go outside of Lake Bluff? Or would we prefer to perhaps bring in a caterer and showcase one of our buildings somehow in-house? And I think there's pluses and minuses to this, and I think we need to have a little discussion about it. And I'm also, you shared something with me earlier about what you're seeing. And
I did, yeah.
If you could
You
share
did
with
see
that.
my email? Yeah, okay. Do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I emailed Mark about was that these days, most of the districts, not all, but most of the districts are choosing not to go outside of the district to have the dinner meeting with the candidate. They're mostly staying within one of the buildings in the district and having a local restaurant from the community cater it, rather than going out and trying to find a place that has to be, you know, obviously it's going to be a public place, try to look for a private room. And with, you know, all the costs and logistics involved in doing that, these days, most of the boards are choosing to have it in-house.
And Jean, you shared some interesting thoughts, if you would share that.
I just felt like there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And I felt a little bit more at ease in a restaurant setting. So if you interpret that based upon what Harry's saying, what we may want to do is maybe you do the presentation in the conference room, and then we'll pick another. There's so many cool places at the middle school. We could think of a really cool place to set up dinner that we could keep confidentiality going and might kind of make the person relax a little bit. Because I think you can accomplish both.
I forgot about the presentation part of all that.
Because they're doing a presentation. You know, the other piece, when you interview outside now, it's changed even in 8 years, you would have to post which restaurant you'd be having to go to. And I will guarantee you, people would, oh, you know, they're meeting at Restaurant A, let's go there for dinner and see who's
walking
going in
around.
and out. So,
Where did you go when you interviewed?
where did I go?
The grill on Laurel.
It's
which is-
closed now,
And
but
now
they had a
it's not
back
there.
room.
It was MLG, and that's not there anymore either.
Right.
I just, I think it's very important on the confidentiality piece. And I think we could make it feel, if you keep in that same conference room, it feels still very business-like. If we moved it out of the presentation room to someplace a little bit more casual, you might be able to have a little bit better
It's an interesting way of
conversation.
doing it, like a
I agree.
two-parter, like a presentation followed by dinner in a more fun setting.
And then followed by an interview on top of that.
Oh, the interview during dinner, no or no?
Typically not.
Oh, really?
No, typically
Oh,
the
they
dinner
all
is-
interviewed me
is
during
more
dinner.
social.
That'd be difficult.
Not that you can't ask questions about the candidate.
So we eat, and then we get it, then we address.
You could
more
move back
specific questions.
downstairs again.
We have to eat first.
I know you do.
Yes. No, we recommend eating first, for the reason being that if the interview doesn't go very well, dinner's not gonna taste very good.
So how do you feel about spaghetti and?
That's not funny, they did that to me in my last
It's a
district.
real test of.
I already told Shelley,
Table
you're not
manners.
having spaghetti.
Well, we're
That's
not, if
out.
we do it on campus, we're not having any wine, no spirits.
Well, keeping it on campus does help a bit with the logistics too, because otherwise you lose time traveling back and forth to,
Well, we have to record, so we have to worry about that, so.
yeah, logistically, it becomes a bit more of a challenge.
Anybody else want to share their thoughts on it?
It feels like it could be kind of impersonal. I think, having it at a restaurant felt like we were offering some hospitality, but I can see logistically that it's
I do agree, though, that sitting in a conference room under fluorescent lights, eating, a meal doesn't make anyone relaxed or happy. So there needs to be some sort of movement to a different space or, nice table set or something,
I'm not sure being relaxed and happy is the goal here. I mean, I like to see people I've interviewed a lot of people in my career. A little bit of tension, a little bit of nervousness isn't bad to see how they react in certain situations. So I feel pretty strongly, as a matter of fact, that it should be held on school property somewhere. I don't know how we organize it. I really don't like the idea of going to a restaurant.
I think we can accommodate
can do
both
both.
ends of,
Like, there's still gonna be,
I'm not the most
a
creative guy in the world,
pressure
but if you could
situation.
take our brand-new library at the middle school, which is a beautiful space, and put some nice tables in there with tablecloths and create an environment that's relaxing and enjoyable, and then go down and do the presentation. Or
Yeah.
use the presentation stairs for the presentation. We spent a lot of money on those, we might as well use them.
and renamed them presentation stairs.
I think it's important to have a fairly relaxed area because most of the person's job is going to be to try to create a relaxed area with situations that come up between them and the community, them and the parents. You know, it's not a, I gotta disagree with John a little bit. It's not like, you know, you're always on a different side of the table arguing about things. It's more of a collaborative kind of a situation. You're trying to work out issues and problems. And I think that a more relaxed area, you see how somebody reacts in that area versus a real sterile, difficult.
So we can have both. Yeah. Then you get to see them in both. We'll have the formal, we'll have the informal, and we might even move you to a third room. We've got all kinds of areas in the middle school. And it's, you know, most of you were all very much a part of that, the renovations, so enjoy the space. I think it's good for the candidate to see it as well.
We can argue about it all night long, but I've discovered more about people when you put them under a little bit of pressure and see how they handle that. It may be in a situation that's a conflict or perhaps in another situation, but, you know, handling stress under pressure is important in any job, so, I mean, that's why I.
Oh, you'll get that up.
I figure that if you're interviewing for a job that you want, you're gonna have enough pressure.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
So am I hearing sort of a consensus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Make it happen.
We'll come up with a couple options. Shelley, we'll come up with options, and they can pick
Spaghetti,
option A,
shrimp.
B, or C.
Light on the
Clams in a
garlic.
half shell.
Yeah.
You're gonna circulate the menu, right?
Yes.
John needs cookies. Okay, any other questions for Harry and Gary?
The only other really quick question is, can we get a digital copy of this? I ask that every time, I know, but just
Absolutely, we'll be sending it to Shelley.
Awesome, great.
And if she wants to send it to the entire board, she may.
Okay.
And we're looking for that to be on your website as well.
Yeah,
based on
as
what
soon
I've
as you
heard.
send it to us, we'll have it up.
great, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
everything.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much, appreciate it, thank you.
So the only thing we have left on our agenda is offer the opportunity for public comment. If anyone would like to address the board, please do so now. Not seeing any. May I have a motion to adjourn at 8:13 PM?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.